Welcome, everyone. I'm Dana Peever, decision expert, author, speaker, and podcast host. You're listening to the Wildly Courageous Women podcast. More women than ever are faced with challenging decisions on a regular basis. I am so privileged to sit down with them to discuss exactly what they've gone through and how they've come out the other side, realizing their wildest dreams. I'm sure you'll be able to relate. And don't forget to stay to the end to take advantage of my latest free gift. Let's get started. Welcome to the Wildly Courageous Women podcast. I'm Dana Peever, decision expert, and as always, we're here talking about decisions that have been made in our lives that were courageous or impactful or changed the course of our life, or even one that we maybe wish we could go back on. Today, I have Kheri Taylor as my guest. Kheri helps parents build better relationships with their children and reduce negative behaviors. You can find her at survive-parenthood.com. Kheri, thanks so much for joining me today.
Oh, it's great to be here. Thanks.
Great. Now, before we get started, I want to remind our listeners that I ask all my guests what their most favorite app is on their phone outside of social media. So you'll want to stay tuned to the end to hear what Kheri has to say, because we've learned of some great apps so far. And you'll also want to stay to the end to get access to my latest freebie. Okay, so Kheri, this is where we're going to get started. We're going to take it step by step. So what I need you to do for me is set the stage for us as it relates to the decision that you've so graciously offered to share with us today. So if you could tell us the background, maybe how old you were, where you were living, what you were doing in terms of work, all those little pieces, if you can go ahead and get us started.
Sure. This happened about 3 years ago. I was 45, single mom.
Okay.
I had 3 kids living with me just before this was happening.
Okay.
So I had a non-biological adult daughter who was right about just before 20. And then 2 younger biological kids who were 14 and 11 at that point. And I was in school full-time doing my Bachelor of Social Work.
Okay.
So yeah.
Busy household.
It was.
Okay, so you said 1 female, 2 males, the younger 2 were male?
My now 17-year-old is female and my youngest is male. Yeah.
Okay. And in terms of their relationship, what did they call each other?
They were just siblings. They called each other siblings. Yeah.
Okay. Because you made very clear mention of the biological versus non-biological. And sometimes families are very specific about that and stay separate. And other times it's like, oh, she's my sister, he's my brother type of thing. So, okay. So it was amicable in terms of their relation, as good as siblings can go type of thing.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay. And you said you were in school full-time?
Yep.
And was that in person or remotely?
That was remote. I made the decision to do online school, partly because I do better outside of a classroom, and partly because the program that I wanted to be involved with was in another province, and I wasn't going to pick up and move and go there.
Right. And as we look at timing then, so we're just probably coming out of the worst part of the pandemic, right? Was this 2020 about?
It was actually just before we went into the gist of the pandemic, just before all the lockdowns started.
Oh, okay. So that started about March of 2020, right? So
yeah, this was about January, February.
Okay, great. Okay, so I've got my bearings in terms of where you were living, what time frame we're looking at. So help us understand now a little bit more about the circumstances. What situation put you in a position that you had to make some decisions?
So, part of the reason why I differentiate between biological and non-biological is to help people understand the makeup of my family and understand why it was a little easier for me to make the decision that I did.
Okay.
Um, my oldest daughter would have been 19 at that point, and she had significant addiction issues. And it wasn't impacting the younger two kids. She was able to, and with her, I had a very specific set of boundaries that
Okay.
she had to function within to stay in the house with her addiction active. And so she was, for the most part, following that. And my two younger kids were not aware
Okay.
of her addiction at all. But it was becoming more and more troublesome. And I had actually decided in December of 2019 that I was going to have to ask my daughter to move out.
Okay.
Um, that all got flipped around because she came home. She would take extended periods away from the house to go and binge and then come back. And she came back and she said, I'm done. I'm ready to get clean. I need a fresh start. I've been going too hard and I need some help. I'm like, great. What are we doing? And so we came up with a plan that she was going to fly to another province to spend 2 weeks with some biological family, get away from all of her influences, get a chunk of clean time, and then come back and start life fresh. So I paid for her flight, got her sent out there, and then literally 2 days later, four kids landed in my lap. And I was asked to be a kinship parent for four kids, 11 and under, for an unknown period of time.
Wow. Is that
Yeah,
similar to like a foster situation?
it's a different type of foster situation. Yeah, yeah,
Okay. Okay.
yeah.
And were they
Um,
siblings?
yeah,
Okay.
yeah, it was four of six siblings.
Wow.
Yeah,
Okay. So I have a few questions before we keep going. So
yeah.
first of all, I want to understand where the daughter was from an education perspective. Had she been able to complete high school at that point?
No,
Okay. And was she working part-time, or was there anything that she was accountable for? Um,
no,
okay.
no.
So 19, how far was she away from getting a high school diploma?
Oh my goodness, I don't even remember. Um, she might have gone to school until grade 10, but it was probably spotty at that point. She had been working part-time, but then her company shut down.
Okay.
And so that actually was part of the reason that she spiraled down.
Okay. Can I ask when you were made aware of when she started, and I'm going to use the term using,
Yeah,
how old she was? Like, was that around grade 10 or was it prior
it
to
was
that?
it was prior to that. It
Wow.
was very early teens for her. And I was aware that she was going to be moving into my place with an addiction issue. She didn't end up living with me until she was just before 16.
Okay. So at that point, she's been with you for about 3 years. She had moved
Yeah.
back in and been. And can you share maybe a couple examples of some of the parameters that you had in place that she was supposed to be abiding by?
Yeah, there were two main ones. One was that nobody in her realm of influence came to my house
Okay.
before I met them and gave approval. And two was no using when my kids were in the house.
Okay. Okay.
And that actually ended up changing to no using in the house at all.
Okay. Did something happen to trigger that change?
Um, it was a colleague of mine who said, look, you're really treading a tough line here. And um, if anybody really wanted to push, they could call child welfare
Wow.
and say that I could be endangering my children. So I just wasn't willing to continue to walk that really thin line.
Understandable for sure, especially given that information.
Yeah.
Okay, so she's at a point where she has said, I want to get better. Obviously at that point in time, it sounds like it had been 7, 8 years, maybe even. She, is doing this voluntarily, and you're assisting in terms of, setting things up and getting her there. So she's not out the door 2 days to her. Did you call it rehab? Is that what?
No, she went to stay with biological family, just to get away.
So
Yeah.
it was not anything, not a professional setting, but just with the
Yeah.
family. Okay, so she
Yeah.
wasn't going to any counseling or anything there. It was just to get away from all the triggers at home type of thing.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, so a couple days later, you have four. I'm assuming they were wonderful children, fall into your lap under your care. Okay,
Yeah.
I think I have it straight in my brain. Okay, keep going. What happened next?
So I was really upfront with, it's called Children's Services here in Alberta.
Okay.
So I was really upfront with them and I said, look, my oldest has an addiction. And I just need you to know that going into this process, that this is what's going on. And if you need to maybe find a different place for these kids to go. And they said, at the moment, it is a family placement. They're not officially apprehended. So basically, what that means is they were involved in the family's life, but they hadn't said that we don't think you're safe enough for us to officially take your kids out of your care. It is your choice for them to be healthy, to live somewhere else while you figure out your stuff.
Okay.
So at that point, it was just a voluntary on the parent part that these kids were going to come and live with me until they figured out their stuff, and Children's Services said, okay, your kids can come back.
Okay.
So that was, oh my word, I can't even describe how hectic that was to have 6 children in my house.
I can't imagine.
Yeah, and driving everybody to school and picking them up and having enough food in the house for 6 kids. And so it was really hectic, and I was regularly talking to my oldest at
Okay.
that time. Um and I was having a conversation with her. It was probably 3 weeks after she was gone, and she made an offhand comment that, yeah, I'll probably start using again as like within the first week that I get back. And I
Oh,
was like, oh man, I don't even know what to do with that. And so I didn't address it on the phone in the moment. I just let it sit so that I could be with it and decide what I needed to do about that. Um, and very shortly after that, the caseworker called me and said, okay, we have officially apprehended the children. So we need to address your daughter's addiction she can't live in the house anymore.
Ooh.
So I was faced with that decision of either saying, okay, I need to hand these children back because I'm not asking my daughter to leave, or saying, yes, I'm going to protect these vulnerable children that don't have anywhere else to go and release my adult daughter making her own choices into the world to find her way.
Wow. I can't imagine the weight, especially on your heart, having to make
Yeah.
that decision. Wow.
Yeah. Yeah.
So help us understand, what you did to work through and get to the other side of that decision. Like again, I can't imagine being faced with that.
Yeah. I cried a lot.
Mm-hmm.
I prayed a lot. Um, I talked to my closest confidants, people who, one of whom has experience in the same social work realm that I did and do,
Okay.
to get her perspective. And yeah, just I really I prayed a lot. I weighed um vulnerable children who don't have a choice in their life versus vulnerable adult who's making poor choices.
Mm-hmm.
And I really didn't feel like there was much of a choice. My daughter was showing that she wasn't ready to change, and that she was going to continue to go down this path of addiction, regardless of the consequences that she had been facing, and the impacts of her choices on the rest of the family. So I ended up really taking a deep breath and having to call her and talk to her and give her the news over the phone, which was so hard.
Oof.
It was so hard to do.
Oof. I can imagine you probably put off picking up that phone for a bit until you knew exactly what you were going to say and had the wherewithal. You were in the right mindset to. I don't know if you could ever be in the total right mindset to have that conversation.
Not really.
Right.
No, no, you just kind of take a breath and jump in and rip the band-aid off. And yeah,
Wow.
yeah, it was hard.
So a few questions just in terms of background. So she was staying with family. Did you talk to them at all about what your decision was going to be?
No, I didn't know them,
Oh,
never
okay.
met them, never spoke with them.
Okay.
Yeah, they weren't involved in it. Yeah.
And do you know if she was using there at all, if it had gotten to that stage?
As far as I'm aware, she hadn't used there. She didn't have any connections there to find anything.
Right. So she was just indicating that as soon as she came back, she would probably
Yeah,
just fall into the same patterns again.
yeah,
So
yeah.
how long had she been gone at this point in time?
I want to say probably three, maybe 4 weeks, 3 or 4 weeks, something like
Okay.
that. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. So where were you sitting or standing when you made the phone call? Were you in your house?
Yeah, I was in what I call my quiet room because it's supposed to be my room without clutter and whatever, that I can just go and sit and be quiet. And I've got a lazy boy chair in there that's all nice microfiber, comfy, whatever. And
Perfect.
yeah, so I was sitting in that chair and I was alone in the house, middle of the day on my cell phone.
So the 6 kids were all at school.
Yeah,
Okay. Okay.
yeah,
Whew. So you dial her number and she
yeah.
picks up. And how
Yeah.
does that conversation go?
Um, the usual, hey, how are you doing? How's life treating you? Yada yada. And then, okay, I've got to talk to you about something. Um, and to to start, I think with the shock, she was very understanding.
Hmm.
And she said, yeah, those four little critters need you more than I do. We'll figure it out. I guess I'll stay here for a while longer. And I was so happy about that because it it wasn't as difficult as I thought it might be.
Right.
I still felt so guilty and so awful having to first do it over the phone, second do it while she's out of the province, and third do it at all because she's still my daughter,
Right.
right?
I think that part
Um
goes without saying for sure.
yeah,
Mhm.
yeah. So I mean the initial phone call went really well. It was after that, after she got off the phone, after she talked with um other people, that it really devolved, and she became very upset and very angry. Um and it ended up on Facebook and social media and all of that. Um so yeah, yeah.
So, how much time lapsed in between that conversation and when her tune changed?
A couple hours.
Oh, that quickly.
Yeah,
Oh my goodness.
yeah,
So she obviously had conversations with people, probably from back home that she was still in touch with and that type of thing.
yeah.
And when you say social media, was that a situation where she was posting things that she couldn't believe this was happening to her? What types of things were being said?
Yeah, yeah, I no longer have a home to come back to. Can't believe this is happening. Does anybody know where I can live? And people were commenting under that, and she never named me by name. Um, through the whole thing, she never named me by name, which was I appreciated.
Mm-hmm.
But anybody that was close enough to her knew who she was talking about. And
Right.
so a lot of the comments really devolved, and yeah, it was really tough.
You know, when I think about circumstances like that, so often society puts pressure on people to make a decision based on what society thinks is right. And it's just kind of a blanket approach, right? How dare you kick a child out
Yeah,
or not provide for a child? And those types of situations don't always look at the intimate details of what's going on with that particular situation. And that's where, your keyboard warriors, feel they have the power to judge and to uh, you know, feel like they know everything behind the scenes and they could have
yeah,
helped you make a better decision.
yeah.
So, does that, social media storm go on for a short period of time or how long?
I didn't really keep track of it because I didn't want to get caught up in the drama. And I kind of had six kids that I had to take care of.
So,
So I had to, for the most part, just put it aside and focus on the kids that were in my home and in my care. And just I took a step back, and I left communication up to her,
okay.
um, for her to reach out when she wanted to talk to me. And it took her a bit. She wanted to negotiate. Well, can I just come back and I'll find another place. I'll make sure that I'm not using in the house. I'll make sure this, and I was like, I'm sorry. I can't. They were like, children's services was very clear. You cannot be in the house with these children.
Wow. So it's
And
It sounds like when you made your decision, you were steadfast in the decision. You were very confident in the decision that you'd made, and would continue to not waver.
Yeah.
Because that doesn't always happen, right? You make a
Yeah.
decision and then you get pushed or pulled, or whatever it is, and you give in a little bit, and it doesn't sound like you were doing any of that.
Honestly, if I hadn't have had those four kinship kids,
Mhm.
I would have wavered. I
I'm
would have.
sure.
If it was just my biological children, I would have said, yes, come home and we'll give you 4 or 6 weeks to save up some money, to find a place, to find a new job, and we'll ease you out.
Right.
But I didn't have that luxury. I was caregiving for four extra children
Right.
who were coming out of a very tough situation. And they just couldn't be around addiction.
Wow. So tell me then, what happened in her life. I'm going to be curious to understand what happened to those four kids. I want to know if there's a relationship now. Help me fill in the blanks there.
The four kids ended up moving on very shortly. Um, Ended up that one of them just had way more needs than I could provide for. And he had to go to a very special boys' home to be adequately taken care of.
Okay.
Um, my relationship with my daughter was bumpy, was really bumpy, really tense. After those kids left, she called me again and said, can I come home? And I said, I'm sorry, I can't. I know that you're in active addiction again, and I can't have that around the kids again.
So by this time she was back in town.
Yeah, she was back in town. Her life had gone really downhill. Um, she was couch surfing, active addiction. It wasn't good. She stopped speaking to me for probably a good year, maybe a year and a half.
Wow.
And I would comment on her things on Facebook or send her a, hey, I'm thinking of you message on Facebook Messenger. But otherwise, I just left it completely in her hands whether she wanted to talk. And she came back about a year and a half later and wanted to get her things because she'd never gotten her things from my house,
Oh, wow.
and potentially restore the relationship. And that kind of went up and down for a year, um, before I really just had to walk away. Um, and as far as I'm aware now,
Mhm.
she's clean and she's stable,
Great.
which so thankful for. But we aren't at a point of having a good relationship at this point. Um, so yeah,
It
yeah,
still feels, what I'm hearing is it still feels fairly raw, even though it was, 3 years ago. It's going to take a while to work through all of that.
yeah,
Wow.
yeah.
So, Kheri, how do you feel about the decision that you made?
Well, I can't say I feel good because it was a rock and a hard place. There was no good outcome for the decision, whichever way it went.
Right.
Um, but good came out of it. And so I'm thankful that I had to make the decision that I did, because I think that if my hand hadn't been forced, I would have probably allowed her to come back and enabled for longer.
Right.
So having it happen the way it did, it gave me a clear reason to make that decision and have her out of the house, which was best for my children
Right.
in the long run
Right.
anyways.
Right. So how long did you actually have those 4 kids? What kind of time frame?
I think I had them for 2 months.
Okay.
Yeah,
So I can only sit here and think how serendipitous life is sometimes,
yeah,
because I feel that if you had not had almost the excuse,
yeah,
right, of those 4 kids, you might have continued to enable only because you wanted to be a good parent and
yeah,
offer some stability.
yeah,
In the long run, she's doing great. It sounds like it's, she's much better than she was, 3 years ago.
yeah,
uh so those 4 kids got all the love you jam packed into those 2 months that they were with you. um your 2 kids that are, were home with you, certainly were in an environment that was healthy and free from, addiction. And ultimately, she managed to turn things around as well.
yeah,
Wow.
yeah.
And now, where are you left with all of this? Are you still um smarting in a, like, are you still hurting it all from everything that's transpired? um is what's in your heart right now?
I I'm smarting that we're not on good footing right now. Um, but that's her choice right now. My door is open.
Okay.
Um, and and if she ever does want to open that door and do some talking, and I've told her, if you want to go to counseling together, I am totally open to go to counseling together and work through whatever you need to talk to me about and get out. Um, but ultimately, right now, I I'm at peace with the decision and that it had to be made.
Mm-hmm.
Um, it's opened the door for another non-biological daughter to come in, and so now I've got a 24-year-old daughter living with me with her son. So I'm a nana.
Wow.
And yeah, so I was able to help somebody else because of that, and they've made a great life because I was able to have that space available.
Right. I feel like if we ever got a look at your heart, it would be larger than the average bear. So, Kheri, I really appreciate you sharing so many intimate details of, such a personal family story. Um, it really showcases the, the hardships that families go through, behind closed doors, that people don't necessarily know about, and the positions that you're put in that force you to make decisions that aren't always easy, as we witnessed here. So
Yeah,
thank you for sharing that with us.
you're welcome.
So, um, just a reminder, I have that question for you about the app. So, as always, listeners, you know that I ask all my guests what their most favorite app on their phone is, and they can't say anything that's social media related. And I always joke and say, I hope that the Decision Smith app is one on your phone as well. And if it's not, please download it. But outside of those, Kheri, what is your favorite app?
My favorite app is Viber, Viber.
Oh, I haven't heard of it.
Yeah, it is a communication like texting, but it goes through Wi-Fi and the internet and stuff like that.
Okay.
And so my best friend introduced me to it because she lives in a different city than I do. And that's how we communicate. We talk every day through Viber, and yeah, so that's my favorite.
Great.
But I did download the Decision Smith app, so it's on my phone.
Great. Oh, thank you for that. That makes me feel good. Thank you so much. Kheri, I really want to thank you so much for sharing your time today and your stories with me. To all of our listeners out there as well, thanks for joining us. And if you're ready to realize your wildest dreams, come and join us in the Wildly Courageous Women Facebook group, where we're changing people's lives one brave decision at a time. I'm Dana Peever. Until next time, make great decisions and do life fun. Thank you for tuning in to this episode of Wildly Courageous Women. Keep listening to hear more stories of these incredible women realizing their wildest dreams. If you have a story to tell about a decision that you've made that has impacted your life, I'd love to feature you as a guest. Please get in touch. And don't forget to grab my latest gift by clicking below. I'm Dana Peever. As always, make great decisions and do life fun.